What's up people, it's Multiplier here. What I thought I'd do today is run you through kind of how I mixed this track I just finished called Get It, featuring this cool dude called C, who did some vocals for me. And yeah, I think it covers some really cool kind of fundamental mixing concepts. So I thought it'd be a nice example, since I had a fresh track in my mind, of kind of explaining some of my thought processes and kind of how I approach the mix in this. Because I'm pretty happy with the mix, and it kind of covers some of the more advanced mixing ideas, but I actually have something to show you on instead of me just talking for 20 minutes and then people being like, I don't know what you mean because there's no examples. So what I should probably start off with is by playing you maybe the first minute of the track. So yeah, let's just play that. Let's drag this over here and play.
Spot with my North Face zipped up, flip cup, flossing with my chin up. All these bitches saying I should cheer up. Sad boy face, cause the onion made me tear up. I hit the lid up when I'm near one. I don't fear none but the real one. Prayer hands for the real son, asking for $1 million, maybe $1 million. Man, you seen a mom, good jeans, red selfish denim with the red seams, red beams, cause I'm killing niggas. Ain't got a street team, but they feel a nigga. Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money. Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money. Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money. Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money. Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money. Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I got.
Cool, that'll do just nicely. So you got a feel for the track. It's kind of hip-hoppy, got some sort of dancehall vibe with the bass, and it's got some trap elements on the drop. And yeah, it's just kind of a cool song, really. So yeah, let's talk about the mix. So when I started this mix, just like how when I start any mix properly, what I kind of thought about is, right, what elements are the important elements, and what elements need to be kind of the center of attention, and what elements are just kind of side shit. So it should be pretty obvious. The vocal is the primary element of the whole track. It's not really kind of even kind of a joint first priority with the synth like you can have in quite a lot of genres. In this particular track, the vocal is by far the most important element. Second most important element is that bass, just because it's super fundamental if you want to play it kind of in the club, and it really just gives it kind of a lot of the vibe just comes from that bass. So I really needed to make sure the bass was working as well. Everything else just kind of fits in around it, and it's a case of just making everything else work with those main two elements. In particular, the vocal has got to be the main element. So that should be kind of rule 101. Find the important element. In this case, it's the vocal, and then have everything else fitting around it. Now, if you're making a different sort of track, maybe the kick and the bass is the most important element and everything else fits in around that. Or maybe the kick, the bass, and the main synth, the three fundamentals, and you fit everything else in around that. But that's going to be the thing you do. Find the most important thing. Don't worry about fucking compression and EQ and useless techniques and shit at the very first stage. It's all about conceptually finding the most important thing and then using those techniques, you know, stuff like effects, compression, EQ, whatever, to really kind of make the things you want happen. So in this case, I want the vocal to be front and center, and I really wanted to not go too crazy with the vocal in terms of kind of making sure you needed to have decent speakers to hear a certain effect. I wanted to make sure this vocal would still work through iPod headphones, for example. So what I did is I basically let's start straight off with the vocal, and I'll show you some practical things about what I did. So you'll notice how the vocal in this particular case is split up into 3 layers, and that's for a very particular reason. It wasn't just the fact that C gave me the vocal in 3 layers. It's because, yeah, it is the 3 important layers. So we have at the bottom, what I call like the main vox, so the main vocals. And this is almost like, I guess, the verses. So it sounds a bit like this.
All these bitches saying I should cheer up. Sad boy face, cause the onion made me tear up. I hit the lid up when I'm near one. I don't fear none but the real one.
So you see how it has kind of quite a lot of character. It's not just completely straight, and it's really kind of front and center. It's not kind of panned out to the side doing weird shit. It's really front and center. Now, it doesn't mean it's just front and center. If you noticed, when I play it again, listen for some cool, subtle delays happening on the sides. That really kind of fills it out, makes it a bit more interesting while not really distracting you from the important bit, which is the vocal itself kind of being right in the center. So yeah, I'll play it again.
All these bitches saying I should cheer up. Sad boy face, cause the onion made me tear up. I hit the lid up when I'm near one. I don't fear none but the real one. Prayer hand.
Pretty rad, right? So what sort of processing did I do to it? So if I pretty much just turn things kind of all the way off, I'll kind of show you layer by layer what I did. So without any processing at all, sounds a bit like this.
Hands for the real son, asking for $1 million, maybe $1 million.
Now don't get confused because of the fact it is quieter. Louder is always better, but you got to listen for how it actually sounds. Now you notice how it sounds pretty much just like you recorded it. Doesn't sound too processed or too refined or even with too much character, and that's because it's pretty much straight out the mic. So what I did very first of all is see what I did. I'm not even sure what I did. I know what I did. I chose a preset. So one of my common things I always like to do with vocals that come straight out of microphones is, especially with rap vocals or hip hop vocals, I like a really compressed sound with a lot of character. So what I pretty much do as a standard is to save me loading up, say, Isotope Alloy, and then playing around with all the kind of dynamics and the EQ and the compressors and trying loads of settings to like kind of get the sound I like. It's a lot quicker for me just to choose a vocal preset and just cycle through them until I like the character of one of the particular presets. So kind of turning this off and on, you should be able to hear the difference.
For the real son, asking for $1 million, maybe $1 million. Man, you seen a mom. Good jeans, red selfish denim with the red seams, red.
So yeah, it's also doing some cool kind of gating to get rid of some of the background noise, but also compressing it and just giving it a bit of kind of high frequency action as well, and a little bit of de-essing as well. So after that, I did almost certainly, looking at this, it's going to be another kind of compression preset. So I'm really a big fan in this kind of style of music, and it's something I really want. It's kind of a really compressed vocal, but not in like a flattened out, boring way, just a really kind of compressed sort of sound. Especially when you're compressing something that's already been processed, it kind of, I don't know, just gives it an extra sort of edge. So when I turn it on, you hear the difference.
Hands for the real son, asking for $1 million, maybe $1 million. Man, you seen a mom.
So it's even more compressed. It's been made even brighter still, as well as having some other weird kind of characterful EQ action in there. And then what I did after that is something that I've pretty much made one of my kind of standard kind of go-to techniques for vocals, and that is using the exciter in Isotope Alloy. So turning this on, you should be able to hear the extra kind of crunch it gives.
Hands for the real son, asking for $1 million, maybe $1 million. Man, you seen a mom. Good jeans, red selfish denim with the red seams.
It's basically added in some mid-range and high-frequency distortion, kind of quite subtly. Just gives it kind of a bit of edge, a bit of character, without sounding distorted and without detracting from the main sound. So now you can already hear it's already got a bit of character now because we've just done some cool processing.
I hit the lid up when I'm near one. I don't fear none but the real one.
Pretty cool. And then what I did after that is I started basically giving it some more character. So I used Sigmund, which is a really cool delay unit, and then I cycled through some presets that I found a cool vibe. So
I hit the lid up when I'm near one. I don't fear none but the real one. Prayer hands for the real son.
So you can see in this particular case, it's a pretty dry signal, but it's just kind of throwing some cool delay on there. Just to make it a bit more interesting, give it a bit more character, but again, not too distracting, because this has really got to kind of stand out. It can't be too mental with delays and weird shit happening. So, and then what I did is I added on a more kind of delay that kind of really filled out the side. So
I hit the lid up when I'm near one. I don't fear none but the real one. Prayer hands for the real son, asking for $1 million, maybe $1 million. Man, you seen a mom.
So you see, it's not only filling up the sides, but it's kind of changing the character even more. So yeah, it's just kind of giving it character, and that's kind of one of the whole points, is just making shit interesting. So yeah, that was kind of one of the ways I processed the vocals. Hopefully that didn't take too long. Crikey, took a little bit of time. Anyway, continue forward. So what else did I do after that for the vocals? So the vocals important, that's why I'm spending time on it. So after that, what I did is I did a similar process for the hook, except I used a different bunch of settings. So you notice how this is what the main bit, kind of the verse, sounds like.
I hit the lid up when I'm near one.
And then the hook.
Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money. Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money.
So you see how it's even more kind of up front and center? And that's because it's the hook. I really wanted it to kind of stand out and just go somewhere different. And it's the sort of thing, in the track, when you first heard it, you probably didn't necessarily notice that the vocal processing was different on the verse to the chorus, but you still heard the effect, as in the chorus sounded different. And it sounded more kind of chorusy and more kind of the main part of the song. And that's because it sounds more there, if that makes sense. So it's definitely a case of treat your sections differently so you can have the desired effect. It's pointless me showing you compressor settings. It's more kind of conceptual in terms of getting, say, a compressor or an exciter to do what you want to do. So yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of character to this vocal. I mean, just kind of hearing this.
Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money. Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money. Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money.
So it's definitely giving it some character, but not being too distracting. And then what I did with the vocals is this other layer in the middle called kind of adlibs. So these are these sort of sounds, something like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Next. Rest.
So you see how this is definitely background vocals. So the way I did that is, notice how for the hook and the main vocals, I didn't use any reverb, and that's for a particular reason. So what reverb does is it's almost like two different spaces in the mix. There's almost like the center, which is almost like the front, which is like the unreverbed part of the mix, and then the reverb is kind of the sides, which is like the space. So it's quite a common trick to do is the things you want to be center of attention. I shouldn't have put this isn't a super important point. I shouldn't have put this so far into the video, but you want to have the things you want to be kind of center of attention. Don't necessarily add any reverb to it, just otherwise the reverb can kind of put things in the back of the mix. Just have it kind of unreverbed, and then things you want in the background to fill out the other parts of the mix, put reverb on it. And that works especially well in this case. So this kind of ad-lib section, almost like the background vocals.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So there's some cool weird stuff with delays and reverbs, kind of putting it in the back. If I did that kind of processing to the main vocal, you wouldn't really hear it. And if you listen to mono or shit speakers, it would sound a bit weird. But it really just kind of puts this layer of vocals behind the main layer. So it's not getting in the way of the main hook, but it's just kind of sitting in the space around it, kind of adding to the vibe and adding to the character. So if I kind of solo the entire vocals and kind of play the hook over the top of the ad-libs, you should be able to kind of hear what I mean. So let's play some of this.
Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money. Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money. Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money. Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money.
See how even though there's quite a lot of ad-lib sort of stuff going on there, it's not really ad-libs, it's more of just like a background vocal. It's not getting in the way of the hook, it's kind of sitting behind it. And that's kind of the key. If you have things fighting for the same space, both are going to get confused and the listener won't know what to hear. It's all about taking the bits of things you like and then kind of making room for it and putting other things in other spaces. So that's the vocals. After that, the next most important thing was the bass. Now, there's not a lot to say about the bass other than kind of what I didn't do more than what I did do. So you'll notice how it's in audio, and that's basically because I used a pretty cool Ableton preset called Tight Full Bass, which has sounded pretty much perfect straight out the box. And then I ran a little bit of super subtle distortion. It's not really that noticeable, but yeah, it's pretty subtle. But what I was finding is I was going through some of my normal bass processing processes, stuff like running it through some really interesting distortion that changes the character of the sound. But what was happening is I was losing the weight of the bass, or I was adding in too many mid and high frequencies that weren't really adding to the sound. So if you listen to the bass by itself, notice how you can hear some kind of low mid distortion, which allows you to really pick out the start of each note. But what you're not hearing is a lot of mid range or top range that's filling out unnecessary frequencies. So it's just a really nice amount of distortion straight out of the box, so I didn't have to do any EQing. I tried doing loads of distortion, but it just didn't really fit with everything else. So occasionally I'd come up with some cool distortion that might work by itself when the bass was soloed, but then when I put everything else in, you didn't really hear those upper harmonics or the mid harmonics of the bass because everything else was sitting in the space. So it was a case of just not put it in there. There's enough distortion on the bass or enough saturation, warmth, call it whatever you like, for you to really hear the notes of the bass, but it's not kind of an unnecessary amount of stuff in there. So it was really, really nice, and yeah, pretty stoked how it came out. Also notice how I kind of subtly made the bass louder for the hook by like a dB. I think it was literally just 1 dB, just so you really kind of went to the next level subtly on the main kind of chorus or drop hook section, whatever you want to call it. So another kind of super important tip that another super important decision I made in this particular track is what you'll notice is there's not a lot of elements in this mix. There's pretty much, you got your bass, you got these synth sounds, feed around like a snare, bit of a kick sort of thing. But there's not really much else to it. And I had quite a few effects in initially when I first started this track. But what I was finding is the effects weren't really adding much to the track. They were just kind of taking up lots of space and making it a nightmare to mix. I was losing all my headroom. I was getting loads of weird kind of interactions between the effects and the synths and the effects and the bass and the effects and the vocal. So what I kind of consciously did was just delete a shitload of tracks, and then by deleting those shitload of tracks I kind of freed up some space for the important elements, because these effects weren't really important, they're more just background. So freed up space for the important vocals, so the vocals have room to do their thing. They freed them up for the bass to do it, so they just kind of made everything a lot easier, and it was kind of pretty much the turning point in the mix because I was struggling a bit. I struggled on the arrangement. The arrangement's still a bit weird now, but I was kind of struggling with the mix, and then as soon as I deleted a load of stupid effects that I just didn't need, that I just felt like I should have in there, suddenly I was like, wow, I have all this space and now it all fits together. This is awesome. So definitely recommend, if you're having mix issues, just go down your list of tracks and go, I know my project looks great with 70 layers, but do I really need all these things? So it's definitely something to consider. Also, if you remember how I talked about with the vocal, how you want kind of the most important thing in the center, not reverbed, and then you almost got, then that gives you space around it for reverb things. Well, that is coincidentally exactly how I got the synth and the vocal sitting together. So if you kind of solo the synth and the vocal, you'll notice how they kind of sit together really, really nicely.
Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money. Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money. Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money. Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money. Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money. Get it, gotta get it.
Notice how they don't really fight. They just kind of, even though they occupy a lot of similar frequencies in a lot of places, they just kind of sit around each other. And that's very, very simply because of what I just described. So the vocal hasn't really got, or doesn't have any reverb on, at least the main hook. The adlibs have a little bit, but not a lot. This warp drive sound, which is one of the presets I made for a sample pack, is literally a synth in massive. In fact, I can probably show you. It's a synth in massive. Oh no, I can't show you. Actually, yeah, I can, because it's still down here. Yeah, it's a synth in massive that basically has the, I don't know, have I done it right? Pretty sure that hasn't loaded right. Whatever. Yeah, it's a synth in massive. Ignore what I just said. It's a synth in massive that has basically a completely wet reverb signal. So you're only hearing reverb. It doesn't really have any of the original synth. It's just all this reverbed. That's why I call it like warp drive, because of the kind of spacey effect. So So you're hearing 100% wet reverb signal, which just kind of puts it in the back of the mix and also just fills out the kind of the stereo image and the space, allowing you to put something, in this case the vocal, right up the center, and then they don't get in the way. So that worked out brilliantly. So yeah, that was pretty awesome. Another cool little tip I would say is I put in, basically because there were a few issues with the vocal. It was pretty good vocal to begin with, to be honest, in terms of kind of the content and the intonation and the dynamics and stuff. The only issue was very occasionally you can hear a few artifacts from the kind of the recording. So I wonder if I can show you one as an example, and then I'll show you what I did to fix it. So let's listen to this. I think. Girl Scout cooking, girl, give me that nookie. There you go. So listen not to the vocal, but to some weird kind of, it's almost like a papery sort of, kind of washy sort of sound that's happening, kind of a bit choppy. Girl Scout cooking, girl, give me that nookie. I'ma hand you like a book. And no matter how much I tried to gate it, I just couldn't get rid of it without the whole vocal falling apart. So what I did is I masked it. So I put some of the reverb tails from the synth that sounds a bit like this, or like this. I put some of that sounds, or some of those sounds in quite subtly, just where the vocal had some weird kind of artifacts I didn't want, just to kind of mask it and just kind of dominate over those weird little vocal things. So you don't really hear them. In fact, you don't hear them at all unless you really, really listen out for it, because of these cool little effect type things in there. And because they're kind of related to the song, it sounds like they're just part of the song. It just sounds like part of the background kind of atmosphere. So there's a good little tip for you if you have something you need to kind of cover up. Just put some effects or some effects that are related to the song, but kind of bury it a bit. Also works quite well if you have, say you're doing a bootleg remix of something and the quality is a bit dodgy because it's a bootleg. You can mask it in lots of ways, and this is kind of one of those ways. Although this isn't a bootleg, it's using a vocal that was made for the song. Now, I'd say one of the other main points of interest for the mix, we're taking a bit of time, but you know what? Knowledge videos do take time, get over it, is what I did with the kick, which is this kick. It sounds shit, and I layered it with this. Still sounds a bit weird, but then trying to get that to work with the bass, so. Now, this was one of those weird cases where it doesn't really happen for me personally that often, because I don't normally, in fact, I pretty much never layer things in this way. But the standard approach would be come up with a really nice kick and then either have it with a high frequency so that it has no sub in it, so it doesn't interfere with the sub of the bass. Or what you do is sidechain the kick that had a load of sub in it with the bass so that the sub of the kick wasn't happening at the same time of the sub of the bass. But I tried a load of this, and to be honest, it wasn't really making it sound any better. And I was basically just doing it because I felt like I should. And for some reason, it kind of just sits together nicely. So this is a prime example of sometimes, even if it doesn't seem to make sense in your head conceptually in terms of, well, that shouldn't go with that because that should cause these issues, and well, that's going to cause headroom issues, and this is going to cause that and that. If it kind of works, and just fucking leave it. Sometimes it's good to trust your ears. I tested it in loads of places to make sure it wasn't my kind of headphones confusing me, but I think it just kind of worked together in some sort of weird way. Well, that's a weird noise. Did you hear that? Not sure if you heard that in the video or not. I've never heard that noise before. That wasn't good. So yeah, that's my tip. Basically, sometimes if it works, it works. Don't have to go through the standard approaches. And I also did, although it's not really super important, but a whole bunch of standard, just taking out the low end around this sort of mark. And I knew to do it at that particular mark because I knew by looking at the spectrum analyzer how much, what frequencies the bass was taking up. So pretty much all the layers you can see. You can see here, for example, is another example of me just taking out the low end where it's not needed. That's just standard mixing stuff. If you haven't seen it before, basically you just keep pulling one of these kind of high pass filters out until you can start to hear the change, and then you pull it back very slightly so that the sound sounds the same, but you're just clearing up that low end so that things that actually need the low end kind of have the room to be there. And yeah, do I have any other kind of relevant points? I think I've covered the main ones. Things like treat the reverb signal as kind of the back of the mix, kind of almost like if you imagine the mix as being a room, the reverb signal is kind of like the outer bits of the room. So it's not in the center, it's kind of like the walls and the big gaps of air around the walls and the ceiling and the floor, whereas the unreverb signal, which is the center of attention, is just right in the center. So you can put things in the center and you can also put things in this room around the side. So that's kind of a nice way for your mix to work, and that way your brain's not getting confused, because remember, reverb is, although a lot of it's synthetic, what it's simulating is it's putting things in a real space, because when you exist in the real world, you're constantly hearing reverb, whether you know it or you don't. And reverb is basically your brain hearing the reflections and putting things in a real space. Now, if you have everything with reverb, your brain can't really process all that, and it can't really put it in a space because it's hearing too many echoes from too many things, and it can't really deal with it. So give certain things reverb, then your brain can process it, it can put it in a space, but then don't put it on everything, so you don't get this sea of noise. Well, it's not really noise, just a sea of echoes that mean that you can't pinpoint where the echoes came from, so you can't pinpoint the sound or even the environment. Did that make any sense? Hopefully it did. And yeah, I'd say, because some of you might ask, this particular sound here was basically perfect right out of the box. It's a really cool preset in this amazing synth called Audio Helix. It's like a pan flute type thing. So it had all the cool reverb and delay that just happened to fit in with the track perfectly straight out of the box, which was awesome. But a nice little cool little tip that I'm going to chuck in there as well as a bit of a bonus, not really mix related, is this MIDI effect called Max for Live, called Humanizer. Basically, it adds a little bit of random delay to each MIDI note. So even if it's just 18 milliseconds, what it does is it just adds a little bit of randomness. It still falls loosely on the grid, but it's not quite on the grid, and it just makes it sound kind of human in a really subtle way. Like you're hearing this. You're not consciously hearing those 18 milliseconds, but you are hearing the fact that it's not super on the grid, so it sounds a bit human and a bit more natural. And that's a kind of vibe, but it's just kind of a nice way to set up the song. And I think it kind of also illustrates a nice songwriting point, which is, that's a nice like melodic song element, this bit. But what I didn't have to do is put it anywhere else in the song, because like it's quite easy if you do like a melodic idea or a musical idea that sounds like a melody or whatever. Sometimes you feel like, because it's a dance track or whatever, you feel like you need to put it in loads of places of the song, otherwise it's a waste or whatever. But it was just kind of quite nice to start off as the track like that and just kind of leave it there and then get on with the rest of it. It was kind of quite a nice touch in my head. And yeah. I'm going to call it there because that is a lot of talky. Actually, I'm going to tell you one more important thing because it's a long video. What's an extra minute or two? This particular sound here.
Get it, I gotta get my money, get it, got it.
You don't hear that shit, at least consciously, unless you hear it like listening out for it. But what it's doing is it's just filling out some of the higher frequencies with a really nice sound. It's basically a sample I made for a sample pack, and then I processed it with a little bit of lovely reverb. Just kind of fills out some of the high frequencies in a nice subtle way. So you don't really hear it when it drops. But what it does do is then when you take it away, suddenly, without you being aware of it, you just feel a change. So notice how once this kind of, I call them like top end noise fills. Notice how you don't really hear it when it drops, but then when it disappears, you feel a change. And it's just a really nice effect. So yeah, kind of listen out for that happening after 4 bars. Oh, Probably play the whole thing.
Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money. Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money. Get it, gotta get it, I get it, I gotta get my money.
So yeah, kind of just empties a bit, and then especially when it drops for the kind of fourth section of the hook, it doesn't drop with that kind of noise fill, so you're expecting that top end information at that point in the song, but it's not there, so it just feels like a subtle change because you want it to vary, but sometimes in a subtle way, if that makes sense. Pretty cool stuff. And fuck it, gonna give you one more tip just because I know some people may ask. It's been half an hour. What's an extra little few minutes? I said that 2 minutes ago. When it came to mastering, I didn't compress it at all because I didn't need to. I just ran it through a limiter. Loads of sounds are already compressed. Remember, you don't need to compress just because you feel like you should. The vocals are already highly compressed. The bass, I mean, look at it. It's fucking flat. So what's the point in compressing that? You're just going to fuck it up. Yeah, just didn't need any compression. I just kind of ran it through some limiting. I think I tweaked the EQ a little bit. I think I brought up like a shelving EQ, probably around 1K upwards. A nice analog model to it, and just kind of make it a little bit brighter, make it a little bit louder, and then I probably did a bit of exciting as well in Ozone. Probably just played around with the presets that I found one that sounded cool. To give it a little bit of extra character. A lot of what comes from the characteristic sound of my mixes is exciting. Not as exciting as the kind of the exciter kind of adding in some of that mid and high frequency saturation. But yeah, and then I ran it through a limiter and just got really careful with the controls on the limiter. Used the Intelligent 3 algorithm on Ozone. Just kind of played around with those settings and got it sounding proper good. But yeah, that's been how I mixed Get It Feet C. What I used to say cool say, but now it turns out it's C, as I found out when I heard this bit of the vocal. Wait, listen to it.
C.
Oh, make more sense if I play this.
It's me. C. Multiplier. Yeah.
Now I know he's called C, but yeah, cool shit. Yeah, like me on Facebook and shit if you want me to let you know when this track eventually drops. It definitely will come out, hopefully not too long, but we will see. Get it? That was completely unintentional, but brilliant. I've been Multiplier. Yeah.